Thank you, ladies, for coming, even though there is the time difference. I think all of the participants are going to be let in because they can hear us as it is. So whoever is running this, can you just let the audience in, please?
Yeah, Kat, it's Justin. They're all in the room.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So hi, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. I have to give special thanks to Cathryn and Jannat because they are coming from different time zones. It is 9 p.m. for Cathryn and I think 11 for you, Jannat. Yeah. Yes, I'm so truly grateful for you doing this in honor of, embracing equity and assisting with that mission through FinTech. So as most of you know, my name is Kukreja, and together with Varley, we are co-chairs of the Blockchain Committee of the FinTech Association of Hong Kong. As many of you are aware, yesterday was International Women's Day, and as a means of celebrating and acknowledging the contribution of women to our community, Erin and I are pleased to present this event on embracing equity through FinTech. To watchers of the industry, the world of FinTech may appear to mirror the worlds of TradFi in that there are women within the industry, but the space remains quite heavily male dominated. And so tonight we're looking to discuss the ways in which FinTech can enable and promote gender equity. And I'm pleased to say that with us, we have Cathryn Lyall, who's our partner at Seed Space Venture Capital, Sisi Liu, who's the Vice President of FinTech and Ecosystem at OCBC, coming to us from Singapore, Jannat Maqbool, who's the Principal Advisor of Ecosystem, coming to us from New Zealand, and then of course our very own Jessica Liu of Planto here in Hong Kong. Welcome, ladies. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to start off, and then Erin can pick up the next one. But would you all mind taking it in turns just to introduce yourselves and to tell us a little bit about your professional journey and how you kind of made your way into the FinTech space? I'm just going to go around the screen, and Sisi is my first panelist. So Sisi, why don't you start?
Okay, sure. So I see myself as a lifelong explorer. I pivoted my career a few times to explore different things. Some moves were deemed unconventional to many. To start with, as an undergraduate, I majored in material science. After completing an internship, I realized that I didn't really enjoy staying in a lab all day, as it made me feel somewhat disconnected from the world. So I started my career in banking at Citibank, which I deemed as a dynamic and fast-paced environment where I could feel less isolated. And also because I thought I was good with numbers. So of course, that's a bit naive, as I found out later that there are many more key factors to success. And within Citi, I tried out many multiple roles at different departments, covering operations, project, and product management, and ended up as an investment due diligence analyst. Then it came to the time that I wanted a change to try out something entirely new. So I did an MBA at INSEAD to explore what's out there, what else I can do besides banking or investment. So FinTech was actually one of the sectors I had interest in. I happened to have a chat with an alumni who co-founded a FinTech company in the loyalty space. And he offered me a role which I had never thought of before, actually, as a business development and partnership manager. So initially I thought, I was quite surprised and even doubted if I could do the job because I'm an introvert in nature and never had related experience before. Yet after speaking to a few friends, I decided why not give it a try, continue to expand my comfort zone, build up new skill sets and see how far I can go. So it turned out to be quite a fruitful experience, and the success I had made along the way further affirmed my confidence and belief in my own potentials. So after a couple of years, I felt I've learned what I needed to, and another interesting opportunity came to me. So I joined the FinTech and Ecosystem team at OCBC. Of course, this opportunity is quite broad in a way that it allows me to work with the various business units within the whole group to help them to source, identify, and evaluate suitable FinTech solutions and ecosystem partners. It's a quite interesting role, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Cathryn, how about you?
Thanks, Kat. So my career, I'm probably the oldest one here, actually. I started on trading floors in the 1980s, in the very late 80s. My first day trading derivatives was Monday, the 19th of October, 1987, which was the crash of 87. And I'd come straight out of university. I had a boyfriend at the time who was a cash bond broker, and he got me a role in futures markets. And I never really left. I was going to go to foreign affairs. That's what I had been trained to do. I was taking a year out to travel, did that, came back and ended up doing this job and stayed with the markets ever since. So I ended up running derivatives business for banks, trading and hedging, execution and clearing. The floors were around back then in the late 80s and all the 90s, especially here in Australia. And then I pivoted to electronic, fully electronic as the markets went too. We always had tech in our businesses, and certainly as banks, we would nurture specific types of tech that would fulfill needs in execution, clearing, settlement, so sort of from front to middle to back. And then, of course, as things became more complex around compliance, surveillance, etc., I ended up moving to the exchange side and moving overseas. So I worked in London for 18 years. And after a big stint there in big pieces of markets infrastructure, building some new pieces of infrastructure from CME Group to ICAP to LSE and NASDAQ, I ended up moving into the FinTech ecosystem post-GFC. We'd had a massive impact in the UK and elsewhere in the world with GFC. And the UK particularly started to look at what it could do to really build a fantastic innovation economy there and be a world leader going forward. And so there was a lot of thought and a lot of smart people and a lot of effort and time and money allocated by the government post-GFC to really try and build out that ecosystem. There was some really great decisions made. There was some mistakes made, but every step of the way, a lesson learned and that real drive and desire to move forward. So myself and 3 peers from financial services decided to set up an early stage venture capital fund, and we invested in purely capital markets fintech. So that sounds very, very narrow as a silo, but actually the market was so big in Europe, particularly in London, we were able to not just do fintech, but do capital markets fintech. And we were focusing on the markets that we knew well, and that was quite large. So a lot of reg tech back then. So probably 50% of our portfolio was reg tech of some sort, solving for MiFID II, EMIR, Bar 3, everything that was happening back then post-GFC. And then a lot of things that were using AI or robotic processing, machine learning, et cetera, to really solve for things that were happening in traditional financial markets. Fast forward to 2019, I came back to Australia very suddenly for family reasons, and I'm a partner here in Seed Space Venture Capital, and we invest in early stage fintech here. We don't have all the incentives we have in the UK or Singapore or elsewhere in our region necessarily, but we do have a fantastic sector with really strong support by the universities. So my career really was from traditional financial services into fintech. I've always been a massive proponent and believer and supporter and mentor to particularly women in markets. I set up Wild in the UK a while ago, women in listed and OTC derivatives, to try and get women up into exec roles and into boards, because in derivatives we get risk better than anyone across every asset class, every regulatory jurisdiction, every national boundary. And then coming back here, I do quite a bit of mentoring through Inspiring Redbirds, and then also through our investee companies as an investor into them. I can talk more about that later on though. Thanks, Kat.
Wow, you have like a really amazing background, and feel like I need to touch base with you offline to learn more about that. Jannat, tell us about you and your journey into FinTech.
So I studied accounting. I'm a qualified accountant, but I did some IT papers when I was at university. And luckily enough, at the same time that I started working, the Y2K bug was becoming an issue, and so I quickly sort of put up my hand as a very new employee at what is now ING Bank in Sydney, and said, I'll do some testing of the superannuation fund systems there. And that got me more and more into the sort of tech side, went from that to a chartered accountant's office and helped deploy Solution 6 there, including the change management, came to New Zealand and started as a systems accountant. And in the first 3 months, I just couldn't do the job. They were reconciling between 2 systems, and I said, there is no way I am doing this. And so I wrote a macro, and it just did it, and it spoke back at the end or something like that. And the managing director was like, who did that? And next thing you know, I was the continuous improvement champion, and we took that company from a 32-year-old finance company that had paper-based contracts for vehicle finance that were folded and put into little envelopes and put in a drawer, and little old ladies that delivered mail and flowers, and we suddenly, it was a digital transformation back in 2002. And
you and Kathy are competing for, like, we have the old war stories on the floor here.
Yeah, but it was like people won't know that Excel didn't have as many rows as it does now. It was limited to 65,000 rows. So which I don't know why they invented that, but yeah, or they had that limit, but we had cubes behind that. We call it APIs now, but we did it all manually. And the address data for credit scoring came in CDs that we loaded into an IBM ACE400, and we did credit checks and things like that. So we ended up launching the country's first online origination system for vehicle finance with a company that we took on that journey with us. And I remember the managing director and I walked in, and he said, she gets what she wants, and we want to be your top 5 partner. And then they said, we've got this little thing that we're playing with, this Java applet, it might be something, maybe not. And I remember we stayed, me, the more recently CEO, and the CTO, who's now over in Australia doing other things. We stayed overnight so we could spec this out. And and that was really cool. And then I left at the start of 2008 financial crisis. I left during that time. I said, see ya. And then I went into academia and taught accounting information systems. So I went to the other side to teach the importance of the tech, the systems thinking, flow charts, just data stuff, in an accounting degree. And so my paper at the tertiary organization that I worked for was the first in the country that started teaching Xero, which is obviously a unicorn from New Zealand. And then I thought, well, I must do something else now, as you do in your life. And so I did a master's. I was like, oh, I'll do a master's. And so I did a master's in digital business, and the research project was for New Zealand's ecosystem, how could banks better collaborate with FinTechs? And that was, it's sitting somewhere, because now it's post-COVID and the world's changed, and so it's irrelevant, but it was a good journey, a good experience. And I interviewed banks and, the whole ecosystem in New Zealand to get a feel for what was the challenges and what were the barriers and what are some of the things we could do. That got me more involved with our local FinTech organization, FinTech NZ, which is part of the Tech Alliance, which is part of NZ Tech. And I was on the board of NZ Tech at one point. And then we managed to, open, Australia did, London did, like England did, and then Australia did open banking. And we don't have that here yet. And so I led the partly government and partly industry funded research project into the opportunity around open finance for New Zealand. And we launched that with the government back in March last year. And the government's now, my understanding is that the government's looking at to inform CDR and what we do in that open finance space. So and I work across other things as well, like IoT and AI and smart cities as well. But I'm an accountant, and I like finance and I like tech, and so FinTech's my jam. And so I was really excited when the now executive director of FinTech NZ said you might be interested in being part of the call. Thank you.
Well, I mean, if anybody needs like more inspirational stories, then like you guys, Cathryn, Jannat, you guys are really like, you don't have to be in finance to do this, and it seems to be really working. But Jessica also has an interesting story. So Jessica, you want to round this out?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica. So I'm based in Hong Kong, but I'm from Taiwan. So I'm currently one of the founding members of a FinTech company called Planto. My story isn't as interesting as the other panelists, so we just keep it a bit shorter. But I started off, my background is in corporate banking, and I had a short stint at a boutique investment firm. So I was in traditional finance for quite a while. And my interest in kind of the startup scene, the whole tech scene, started when I was in this boutique Japanese investment firm, and we started to do a lot of research around emerging technologies, customer, like companies to acquire, and so forth. And my boyfriend, now husband, at that time started wanting to go into entrepreneurship because he found a problem in the market that he really wanted to solve alongside with a couple of his friends. And one day during Startup Weekend International Women's Day, I joined to help try and validate the problem they were trying to solve. And then I realized, wow, like, you know, women actually does have a huge problem when it comes down to managing their finances, because the response during that time when I was pitching was just like everybody coming to me saying that they really want this, you know, the solution that you have. So I quit my job, went without salary for a few months, and started Planto with my husband and my close friends. And I'm really happy to be here today. And just to let you know as well that I'm also one of the board members of FinTech Association. So, you know, it's great to be here.
Wow. So thanks, Cathryn, Sisi, Jannat, and Jessica. That's such rich experiences. It's quite interesting to hear. We'll probably dive a little bit more into your journey a bit later, but it's often said in that, I guess, there's a gender diversity problem across FinTech, specifically saying that we have too few founders, too few employees, and too few female users. Does this kind of reflect your experiences within your various jurisdictions? Maybe over to Cathryn first.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. Yes, it is the short answer. When I started on trading floors, there was 800 on the floor when I started. I think I was the 5th or 6th female at the time. There were very, very few of us trading, and then even less of us running businesses down the track. I think at the end, or at the peak, there was probably about 1,200 on the Sydney floor and about 35 women, but a lot doing more middle office and back office roles versus being at the pointy end of the P&L, which was more common. It was very hard to hire traders back then because even when we moved off the floor and it was electronic, it wasn't an environment that felt welcoming or structured for the way women might like to work. Fast forward, and I think with technology, we don't have enough young women. We don't have women full stop represented significantly enough in the code rooms in the world, in the coding repositories of the world. I think there's bias being built in there that we're going to have to all deal with now and in the future, and probably are. I also think that a lot of women don't appreciate that even if you're arts inclined, or you don't have to be a mathematician or a coder to be in technology. If you look at gaming, the music played in gaming is classical music. You need to be able to do an instrument. The graphics and the art stuff, the stuff that draws you in, is all to do with the creative stuff, just as important as the coding and the things that go on there. And the same is that the user experience is really just that creativity expressed in technology. I think we need to do more. A couple of the entities I'm involved with here, which are trying to build out greater support for women to come into tech. I think we don't do enough in the primary schools and the high schools in Australia. Certainly when I was living in the UK, there were really big programs to support young children and particularly young women going in, understanding getting skills in coding, understanding what the value was in doing that and what the careers could be around that. And that was carried through every step of their education right through. So there was great support, and they're starting to reap those rewards sort of 10, 13 years later now in the UK. And that's something, you know, personally, just speaking for where I sit here right now, we haven't done enough around bringing young girls into education around tech. And certainly, and I'll just add one more thing, from a governance perspective too, I find myself frequently the only female around board tables in this industry. So as an investor, we often are directors of some of those companies. We certainly are board advisors. I have 7 in my portfolio. And there is one where there are a really good percentage, one called Red Belly Networks, which is a Web3 one, has a really excellent coterie of females around the table from a governance perspective. Our industry body is very well represented here. It's 50-50 and the same within the organisation itself. But more broadly, I still see a lot of the same old structures as far as balance. Listed companies are doing better. The listed company I'm on, Wiser, has done fantastically well there as far as gender equity. There's more to diversity though for all of us, and I think that's something we might focus on here later on.
Yeah, no, good point. Good point. Jessica, of your experiences?
Yep, sure. For sure, if we look at when I first started and joined Planto back in 2018, there were rarely any female founders or in fact females in the fintech space, especially in the startup scene, because generally in the beginning, a lot of people or females tend to be more risk averse and see going into the startup ecosystem as something that is a bit too risky. And even then, when you look at FinTech Week, there weren't many female speakers back then, whether it be, let's say, management level or any founders in general. But I think what I've seen in the past few years is that there has been more and more female founders or female employees in the fintech space. And I think it's generally just, events like these, bringing that awareness, giving more examples to the wider community of, the awareness of, let's say, fintech, how, there are representatives out there who are female, who does well, or who really enjoy the space as well, which encourages other females to join too. So, but obviously there is definitely room for even more improvement, because we still see very, when it comes down to the ratio of men and of a male and female, it's still significantly male dominated in the fintech space in Hong Kong.
Right, so moving in the right direction, but still a long way to go, I think. Jannat, do you want to give your view?
Pretty much the same, like lots of effort going on, but I think with the STEM, that the focus on STEAM or STEM or whatever you want to say to get it, it's too late in the piece. Like, it does have to start at primary school, and it starts with math. Like, if you want to get into the development side of tech, it starts with math. And now our math curriculum in New Zealand is shot. It's been rewritten for like the 4th time, I think, that my kids have been through school. So we're not getting the basics right. And I've been involved. I'm on the executive committee, or was up until a couple of weeks ago. I resigned, but of Tech Women, which is like a body that works across the country to encourage more females into tech, but also when they're in tech, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is when they have a role, where's their tribe that helps them and supports them while they're there as well. But we ran a program for a number of years before COVID, which we're just trying to get back up and running this year, called Shadow Tech, which takes, year 11. So they're probably year 11 and 12 is probably about 15, 16-year-olds, maybe 17 even, and gives them a day to shadow somebody in a tech company, just to see what the role, what the different roles are and how does the company work, and they get lunch and things like that. And the feedback is always fantastic. And I've hosted a couple of those here. And like I said, I'm on the exec that sort of gets the feedback from around the country. And the feedback around the experience is great. Like, had a great day, people were lovely, blah, 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 played with the VR, that was cool, but they don't see themselves in those roles. There seems to be this stigma attached that you have to be a coder and you have to sit there and code. And so I don't think we're doing enough about what the roles are for men or women. Like, I don't think they understand really, the potential of technology, that it's everywhere. This data thing is everywhere all the time. And so I remember in the AI space, again, a group of high school girls had come up to the university here when I was part of launching the AI Institute, and I got to talk to them, and there was probably about 12 around the table. And I said, how many of you study maths? And probably, in that year, because you don't have to take it, it's not compulsory. So I think there was one girl that was still doing maths in her final or second to final year. And then I said, how many, do computer science? And maybe 2 did computer science. And so they automatically thought that I was asking, back to a point that Cathryn made, that I was asking, well, that's it then, only 3 of you are going to get into tech. And I said, I said, tech is relevant to all of you, and you all will be a user of technology. So you've just got to decide, are you going to be in the driver's seat when it comes to tech? Or are you going to be someone that is sort of midway and can influence, but doesn't necessarily have to be the coder or the developer? And they said, oh, no, it's not, I'm going. And I said, you can't tell me a career or a path that you're taking that I can't tell you how AI applies to that. And they couldn't, you know, and they just threw them at me. They said sports science, and I said, well, this, and this, and they show, you know, the other one was business, and obviously that was a clear one. Art, it was a real clear one. So I don't think we're doing enough of this real. Actually, it's everywhere. It's all over the place. And the other thing that I think we're getting wrong is, so we're not starting early enough. We're not having the right. We're not telling the right tales. I guess we get the same stereotypes talking to them. The second thing is we're not talking as widely as we need to be about where is tech and data in our day-to-day lives, and actually what's the relevance of the everyone. And the third thing that we're getting wrong is that, you know, the conversation I work on a number of areas around digital inclusion, and then the next step is, you know, how do you bridge that gap when you study, you know, you get them to study something, but how do you get them into a tech career? And there's a real mismatch. So I don't know if anyone's been following what's happening in New Zealand. There's not a skills shortage, it's a skills mismatch. It'll probably be the same in Australia. But what we're getting wrong is the conversation is give them a job, but actually the conversation needs to be you need them. You know, like, so you need diversity of thought at the table in order to truly innovate. That's what I say often. And so we're not getting innovation quite right, because everybody that's there currently doesn't think from the different perspectives that we need to be thinking, and especially in the space that I'm playing in at the moment, which is, you know, suddenly bank data is going to be available, and the financial systems data is going to be available, and consumer data right will come in, but those consumers have no idea what they're doing either. And so there's a real responsibility that's sort of lurking around there, and there's an opportunity in there, and there are a number of challenges, and I don't think we're going to get it right. And I said this at an event recently. I said, many of us in this room, not this room, but at the event, will benefit from open finance and FinTech, and we will do very well, and it will change our lives, and it'll be great. It'll enable us to do things. I said probably 80% of the population will still be where they're at. So how do we take everybody on that journey?
Sounds like a lot of different areas to kind of focus on and move forward with. Sisi, over to you, just to round it up.
Yeah, I think I'm based in Singapore, so speaking from my own personal experience, I would say it's a kind of a yes and no answer. So prior to joining OCBC, I was at this FinTech company. So if you look at the total workforce, actually women probably consist of close to 40 to 50% of the total. And even in my current role within our team, I think the gender balance is actually there. It's about 50-50. However, whatever I just said probably only holds true at the working level. So it's always the same story as the other panelists have repeated again and again. At the top management level, the representation of women is definitely under the 50-50 mark. And that's the same pattern we have been seeing, we have been observing in the traditional financial services industry all this year. I think, too much has been said, and we still need to do more. Yeah.
Okay, so then maybe then, and Sisi and Cathryn, I'll give this to you because you guys had like the really stark numerical numbers here. So given the various benefits, you know, and then they're well reported. Like you have women in management, and you see different management styles. You see people being a little bit more broader and lateral in their thinking versus being like really direct and focusing only on the bottom line. You know, you see more cultural influence coming through when you have more women at the top. What do you think at a corporate level could be done to bring more women into, well, I mean, like Jannat's addressed how you can bring more women into FinTech. What could we do to like just push more women up into those roles in FinTech? Let's start with you, Cathryn.
It's hard work. It doesn't just happen overnight. And if you look at, say, the UK, that have had all sorts of programs going for many, many years, those percentages are changing. And we're focusing a lot on the gender piece of diversity here, of the D, and that's fantastic, because that's the first obvious step. Because if you can address that, you will get other diversity. I think Jannat mentioned thinking, you know, cognitive diversity, and I think that's a really great way to change what the table looks like, basically. But it's it's a real process, and it takes persistence, the top down at every level of the organisation, including in these giant banks where everyone's trying to get from director to executive director to MD, like the goal of being MD in the bank, that big sticky middle, that's where a lot of this stuff happens, right? And I mentioned Wild earlier. We did that because when it came to pulling people up into exec teams inside these large organizations, they'd naturally go to corporate finance or M&A or somewhere like that, which were mostly guys who'd done PPE or something like that at university, and that's where they landed. And really, the people who got risk across all this other stuff were sitting over in those small areas inside these organizations that dealt across all these different assets and currencies and things like that. And in fact, a lot of the innovation that happened around tech inside traditional finance came from those areas, listed markets that are trading across physical assets like corn and wheat and soybean and meal and oil and cattle and metals, etc., as well as all the big treasury bonds, and being able to execute those across border globally between Singapore and London and Johannesburg and Sydney seamlessly at T+0 with almost instantaneous clearing and settlement into accounts across multiple, multiple regulatory jurisdictions. That kind of stuff really drove tech in TradFi. And what we've seen with DeFi, I think this whole burgeoning with cryptos and that digitization attempt, or tokenization, et cetera, of real assets has created a whole other paradigm of technology that now we're able to go over and go, oh wow, blockchain, we can actually use that for this, and this over here. This is going to really improve these processes here. So we're on that next wave now, which I think is really, really exciting. I just hope we've all learnt the lessons, and you touched on culture, lessons of culture, on values, on ethics in these things. Because when I started in the market, you've heard the term, your word is your bond, but genuinely the customer was first in everything we did. The company was second, and I was third. We were third. There was absolutely no doubt about it. And fast forward to the GFC, that had all been flipped on its head. It was me first for those in those organizations, hunting those big bonuses and that next new product to squeeze a bit more edge out of. Company second, and the customer was actually the one that all the profits were being made out of. They were kind of the cash cow, if you like. And I think our values and ethics as a marketplace were turned on their head then. And so I'm really keen to hear Jannat's view on this, and everyone else's, around the tech. What are we doing to ensure that we're embedding good structures and values and ethics in how this new tech is going to be deployed going forward? We've got this space race going on. And countries, I think Australia has been allocated to dig stuff up in space because we've got lots of stuff that digs things up out west in hot heat and it's hard. But no, I don't hear any conversations around, should we be doing this? If we're doing it, how are we doing it? How are these resources being allocated to those parts of the world where people don't have any equity in this race at all? And I think technology is the same. If you look at people, right, we've got a huge amount of people unbanked in the world. So we've seen some great ways they've kind of bounced over that with, peer-to-peer stuff on the mobile phone, payments, etc. But there's still a load of people that aren't even digitally connected with technology. And I love what technology can do for us, but it's not necessarily the great level playing field that I guess we all hope it is. We've got work to do. Sorry, I hope I answered that.
No, well, you did, and then you answered the next question too. So I'll ask Sisi this, and then maybe we'll fast forward a little bit with our question list. So Sisi, given that Singapore does, as you said, have some degree or some apparent degree of equality, especially within the middle bulgy bit of finance, where do you see the impetus for pushing women up into those management roles?
Okay, maybe I'll just share what OCBC is trying to do. Yeah, so within the group, we have this OCBC BOS Women in Tech Network, which is employee-led group that amplifies the voices of women tech professionals to create an environment where they can grow and thrive. So under this network scheme, there are 3 initiatives. One is to bridge the gap. So we have reverse mentorship initiatives that help women to break barriers to critical network and close confidence gaps with the support of mentors and the sponsors. We are also equipping our women workforce with the tools for self-advocacy through initiatives like I Am Remarkable that we do with Google. So it's like a workshop you can participate. And then the second one is to address systematic structural barriers. So we want to create an environment that attracts women and promotes them into leadership roles. To get there, we are reimagining our practices and processes, and we're introducing a few new programs and initiatives. So one example is to screen through job descriptions and identify if there's any linguistic gender coding exist, which could potentially lower the appeal and sense of belongings that prevent women to apply for the job. And the third one is to inform and inspire. We share our learnings with our wider community at industry events and career talks, and we hope to attract and develop more girls and women in tech through these efforts. So I think some of the panelists also mentioned earlier, in our experience, it's also similar. We went to the university to recruit, hoping to find some young talents from the technology fields. Then we realized the population of such female students is just too low. So what we did next was go to the secondary school, conduct coding classes to teach the young girls how to code, let them try out. And some of them later feedback to us saying that before that, they never thought of becoming a coder as a career choice. But after that, they may consider. Yeah, I think that's to plant the seed at early stage, to enable them to explore the potential and the capabilities within themselves.
Thank you.
So I guess a question for Jannat and Cathryn. What do you see, what impact do you see the digital economy having in terms of further inequity and inclusion in the future?
I was just gonna quickly jump in, Cathryn, and not specifically answer that question, but I'll tell you what's happening in New Zealand, which might be of interest. So 2018, just around that, so equity and what about our people? So 2018, or it might have been 2017, the government announced 6 key focus areas for where we were to roll out industry transformation plans. And so the first cab off the rank was the agri-tech industry transformation plan, and that was launched, I think it was like either June 2020 or 2021, I can't remember. But the digital technologies industry transformation plan started in 2018 and hasn't still been launched yet. And that is because partway through the process, and I was on the reference group with the government and alongside a few other people, and now it's been a bit more formalized. So we did that from 2018 to the end of 2022, so 4 years almost. We were working on, where are the focus areas, and what are the proposals within those focus areas, and the ones that we identified. I can never remember the last one, but the first one was telling our tech story, New Zealand to the world, look how great we are, look at all the things that we've done. There's Xero, there's the machine learning platform that has taught machine learning across the world for decades was launched here. The language, the platform's called Weka. A statistics language called R, I think it is, was launched here. So we've been quite, we were the first people to use FPOS. So telling the story. The next one was AI as an enabler for the country. Alongside that was Māori tech, so our Indigenous people and technology from an Indigenous perspective was the second pillar. Underneath all of those as underpinning pillars was skills, procurement, data, and I can never remember ever the last one. But that was all put on the back burner because the government said what we first need to do, though, is come up with a digital strategy for our people. So the Aotearoa digital strategy was developed in consultation with community groups and our Indigenous population and representatives, and less so about industry, more about people. So that got launched first. Now the digital technologies industry transformation plan is being launched. The national AI strategy has been put on the back burner. That might come up later this year, maybe next year. But that's the prioritization that the government's put, and it's back on the people. And similarly, in the spaces that I'm in, like open finance, the open finance research report, it was it wasn't academic research, it was industry research, first of all. And IDC, we contracted IDC to do some of that. But we looked at what England had done, we looked at what Australia had done, we did a literature review of all the different sort of countries around the world and what they were thinking around open banking, open finance, CDR. And we did ours about financial inclusion. What would it mean? What would open finance enable when it comes to financial inclusion, and where were the issues when it came to financial inclusion? So it was very much about the people yet again. So I'm quite proud that I was involved in actually both of those things to sort of go people first. In answer to the one that was just before that connects with this though, is you do need to have, like recently I was asked what's the biggest technology that we need to leverage that we're not leveraging for climate resilience or climate change or whatever we want to call it today. And I said it's not the technology, I said it's the people. So the question was, how do we push people up into those spaces? It's not the problem. I think we've got enough tokenism going on there. I think they're not comfortable where they are when they are there. And even if they're there, they're just there, they're not listened to, and they don't really have a voice. It's just the focus has been very much on, look, we're getting them there, we're pushing them there, look, they're there. But actually they don't have a voice when they're there, and whatever diversity that is, they don't feel comfortable in those spaces. They don't feel like even if they do say something that has even influenced a decision. And then there's always in most cases, there's always a ceiling on how much further they can go. So so that's where the issue is. It's just not happening. And so yeah, it's really interesting to watch and just sit back and watch this whole thing just play out. And I just look at it and I just think, wow, so much effort on one side. And on the other side, it's like, you know, every day it happens. Like probably every day I can say where there's no genuine, real, you know, it's just this lip service to diversity at the table. Like I could say every day something like that happens. And I'm not talking about me. I've always had a smooth ride and a sweet ride all the way through. It's the places that I'm in and the conversations that I have with people, like can't get VC funding, like, you know, sorry, you're a woman, you're from an ethnic background. This is again, not me. Someone did say I should start a startup, but it's like, I can't even imagine doing something like that. But she's getting knocked back. It's a person that I know because she's a woman, she's young, she's an immigrant, and she's from an ethnic background. And they just tell her straight up, you are not white enough for us to give you any money. Again,
that is wrong on so many levels.
I know.
I have been recently subject to racism in the workplace, and it is just like, you know, it is like, yes, no, that is wrong on so many levels.
So people aren't safe. Our Indigenous population, you know, I have a lot of friends, and I'm really grateful to be able to call them friends that, you know, Māori get into jobs and roles and organizations and at the table, and you know, and it's called co-creation, but really it's not. And then they don't feel safe, and then they leave.
Yeah, I think this is all true. Can you, I don't know if I can help your friend. In Australia, there are certainly some very strong female founder-focused funding opportunities here that aren't just in FinTech, they're in other areas. I don't know what her business is.
Cybersecurity.
Oh my goodness, well, I can definitely help her with introductions into the UK if she wants to take it over there, because they love that stuff over there. But you know, you've hit on the right thing. So, it's like if you're in an organization, you're trying to nurture high-performing people. What's the pathway? What do you do with them when they get there? How do you show them where that pathway is? When they land there, how's everyone else managing this person? What's all the support you're putting around, not just them, but the people around them, to make sure that you're creating this great cognitively diverse culture in this organization? And you're quite right. You get on a board, and I was on Deutsche Bank's UK Bank board in the UK. It was my first board. It was a giant board, really late 2013, early 14. So GFC, we're in the thick of it. And I was on there for 3.5 years. And I was definitely the youngest and the only female of the NEDs. But they couldn't have been more generous in their support and of me once I got there. The CEO was female at the time and asked for an all-female shortlist for this board seat and challenged the headhunter to go and do it. And it took them a little longer than normal, but they came up with it. And in the end, it got down to 2 of us, and it was very much around personality fit, because we both had incredible skill sets for this board role. So I got there through technically a quota, right? We're going to go for a female for this, and let's only do that. But when I got there, I used my voice. I wasn't scared to ask stupid questions. I had several occasions what I thought was just me asking a really basic question unravel something, and we ended up in something quite important that nobody had really realized, because as the questions kept going, we went there. So it's, you know, it's hard when you feel other around the table, but if you're there, it's usually because you deserve to be. And I guess that's, for me, I've always just gone, right, I'm here, I'm going to make sure people know I am and that I represent all those that aren't around that table, I guess. But so I think, but Aaron, your question, was that more around areas where we need to get more assistance for DEI in FinTech? Was that the gist of that, or have I misunderstood?
Just the general impact on FinTech in terms of further inequity and inclusion. So I think you kind of touched on it.
So and I think one of the challenges, certainly in the UK, I witnessed this firsthand, the GFC, which was punitive for everyone there, right? Was very, we didn't really experience, I've realised now coming back to Australia since, we didn't experience that here to the same degree. A lot of people rolled out of banks, especially in that big sticky middle, rolled out of the banks and went, oh, FinTech, oh, I can be a CEO over there, and would get their little band of mostly brothers and set up something and go, right, I'm going to fix this little thing that I was working on over there in the bank. And let's go see my fund there, for instance, Seismic Foundry, and get some money, and we're going to fix this thing in the bank because we know everyone over there, and they'll buy from us because they know us and trust us. And there would be the 4 middle-aged white blokes, all from pretty much similar school backgrounds, and me and my 3 middle-aged white blokes that were my partners in the fund, who were so pro diversity on all fronts, despite how they looked. They thought differently, and they had behaved differently in the roles they had been in those banks, and in fact had left those because they felt they could not do any more there. So the conversations we had with some of those founding teams, what are your plans for diversity? How are you going to manage that culturally with the, you know, they just sit there, their mouth open, why are you asking us that? Don't you just want us to go and make loads of money and make you rich? Well, yes, and when you're an early stage investor, that is one of the lenses, and probably was the only lens 10 years ago. It's not the case now. If you cannot answer those questions, if you cannot sit down and have a serious discussion with the potential investors around what your plans are as far as how the culture will evolve, how you care for your customer, how you care for your people, what are the ethics and values you're embedding, and how are you going to do that, and what's the team look like? If you can't have those conversations over and over and over again through the investment process, you probably won't get the money these days.
That, I mean, that's all I can say. I'm conscious of time, especially because I do recognize it's late for 2 of you. So I'm just going to skip over ahead. So Sisi, Jessica, you know, let's talk about quick wins, and, you know, in recognition of Aaron, let's recognize also some of our male allies. What do you think could be done to, you know, by way of quick wins that could be adopted by various companies, not just in terms of embracing, you know, diversity, gender diversity, but also just generally like being more equitable? So, you know, in terms of who your products are marketed to, you know, embracing different types of diversity, and so on. And also then for male allies, what can they do to help you guys on that journey? Let's start with Jessica.
Thank you, Kat. So quick wins. I mean, I think it's always great to adopt quick wins. So people would say, oh, hiring more females, or you know, being more active and promoting like diversity and all that. But I personally think quick wins aren't really real progress. I would say that if we really want to, you know, make progress, I think it's also about educating the company as well, the importance of diversity, really what it impacts. It's not just a company image, but you're actually understanding why there is a need of diversity, because, you know, people aren't really conscious about it, but they might, you know, hire people they're more comfortable with, people who they share, you know, more things in common with. That's why maybe males will hire more males, and likewise females as well. But for me, I think one of the thing is education, you know, being able to develop this respect for all genders, transparency around salary as well, so that people know that, you know, they're getting paid at an equal level, or at least they're getting paid for the work that they're doing. It matches. And, you know, yeah, I think those are like 4 things that need to be adopted.
Thanks. Sisi, how about you?
Okay, yeah, I think Jessica mentioned one of the most important thing, education. And in addition to that, I think, okay, just share what we did within the bank yesterday to celebrate IWD. So we actually asked the participants to the event to vote, which are the most important initiative to them, which means most to them. They're given a few options, and most of them just vote flexible working arrangements. Yeah, so I think this has somehow become a norm after COVID. So now people are more flexible as compared to before in terms of working hours. However, I think to women, especially working moms, this is much more meaningful because even today, there's still this social expectation working mom. You are supposed to carry more in terms of the duty within the house. So I think, and also naturally, many women, I think traditionally have been molded in such a mindset. They are more caring and more nurturing. So they tend to spend much more time than the husbands on the children. So I think flexible working arrangement based on today's context is still very relevant for women. And the other one is maybe to introduce mentorship programs to help junior female employees to gain access to the network and the resources they need to grow and succeed. Because traditionally, if you look at the top, it's a boys' club, then it's very hard for women to break in and without feeling alone. And the other one I would think is encourage job mobility within the organization, whether it's big or small. I think what I observed in my previous company and here also, in the engineering team, there are many more men than women. But then when it comes to a different function, for example, maybe marketing or partnership, then there are more women. So at the same time, actually, you can just encourage women to move from their current role into a more technical role if they are keen to learn more and explore their potentials. Yeah.
So that just comes back down to education and having the opportunity available to them, really.
Right.
Can I just, sorry.
I just got a little stat to give you because I think Sisi gave a really, that working mum title that we all get. One of the companies I'm advising here is called Financy. It's a Women's Economic Equality Index, and we just did our latest quarterly release. So in Australia, we have 121 years to gender economic equality here. And the number one biggest problem across the 7 silos, which is super and part-time work, etc., is unpaid work that we do. And that is one of the biggest preventers. And I think you've made some really good points, Sisi. They're all spot on, that impact women in being able to take on these roles and accelerate and do more study and get ahead and try and take on management roles, right? When you're the CEO of the house and the family, as well as trying to do the same thing at work, it's a juggle. I've got a couple of kids lying on the floor beside me right now who are waiting for me to put them to bed because everything, it's just what mum life is.
I'll probably add to that as well as a male ally, right? So I've got a similar situation in that my better half is out of the country on business trips right now. We have a 1.5-year-old kid. And I think it's not just demanding, more kind of work from home or work-life balance. It's demanding more from your men, right? And getting them to contribute more. And I think things are changing, expectations are changing, but it's just to continue to do that and get it out there. So it's kind of a combination of all of these factors. Maybe just conscious of time and to wrap it up in terms of how would you describe IWD? What does it mean to you? Maybe
in one sentence. One sentence, each of you.
Jannat, maybe start with you.
I don't celebrate it. I actually don't. Yeah. but because I just think that I understand. Shouting from the rooftops or whatever, but really there's a lot of work to be done, and I don't think it's this sort of work. Like I think it's flipping the conversation. I mentioned it previously before, like the reason that we need the diversity is because we'll get true innovation, like just basic stuff like what is it, like some stat about how much of the purchasing decisions of a family are made by a woman? Like, so you get women to design your FinTech systems and your payment systems and all that sort of stuff. It's just the facts speak, and that's the speak that we have to have to. If you want innovation in this space, you want uptake, you want user experience, you want your product to scale internationally, then look at diversity as your yeah, and all forms of diversity. Yeah.
Sisi?
Okay, to me, it's quite simple. I think it's an occasion for all of us to celebrate how far we have come to. Yeah, because as Simone de Beauvoir shared in her book, The Second Sex, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. So in the past, women didn't have much choice. But now, many of us just have many more choice. We can make decisions for ourselves. We can drive the path we want to go on. So we can become anyone we want to become. Yeah.
Jessica?
Mine's pretty simple. I think it's just a day that's a great reminder of bring awareness around the disparities and discrimination. I think that's really important. I mean, I do share some sentiment as the same sentiment as Jannat. Like, I don't celebrate it, but I think it's a great opportunity for people to be aware of it. And that's really important, actually. And that's why in the past few years, because it's been so, out there every year, that people get to understand what's going on in the community as well.
Cathryn?
One sentence.
Well, I know, right? I'm an optimist.
With comments.
I'm going to wrap it up, right? I'm an optimist, and I believe tech is a great enabler. And one thing it does is give us access to data that we didn't have in the past, and more of it. And what we're seeing is being able to track what's happening here to the nth degree. And there's a fantastic business in the UK that on IWD, it clicks into life and it follows all these companies making announcements all over the web, and it tracks it back to their medium salaries, difference between men and women, go and calls them out on Instagram, on Facebook, everywhere where they're posting something, go, hey, but you don't walk the walk, you're just talking the talk. And so that's where, wrapping it all up, I think FinTech has a great role to play in diversifying our world, but we have to make sure that we work hard to make it happen. Thank you.
Okay. Well, conscious of time and the lateness of the hour, but thank you all for this. It's actually been really interesting because these have been very distinct viewpoints, and I'm glad that we're not sort of just in a little bit of an echo chamber here. So I've appreciated the dissonance that we've had amongst the discussion. I hope this has been informative for our audience. Thank you all again, and please stay tuned for more events from the FinTech Association of Hong Kong. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.